In my family, there are two kinds of success. There's the kind you can frame and hang on a wall, the kind you can introduce at a barbecue, the kind that comes with a crisp uniform and a clear, definable rank. And then, there's my kind, the quiet kind, the kind that happens behind encrypted firewalls and in windowless rooms, the kind that has no uniform, no parades, and a title so classified that, to my family, it may as well not exist at all. So hey guys, welcome to my life. If you've ever been the other sibling, the one whose accomplishments are written in a language your family refuses to learn, then you're in the right place. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because the story I'm about to tell is a masterclass in being underestimated. My name is Dr. Evelyn Reed. I'm 32 years old. I have 2 PhDs, one in cryptography and another in applied mathematics from MIT. I own my own home, I have a healthy retirement portfolio, and my job, in the simplest, most painfully understated terms, involves protecting the United States from digital warfare. I am, for all intents and purposes, a success. But if you were to ask my parents, they'd give you a very different story. They'd sigh, a soft, pitying sound, and my mother would probably pat your arm and say, "Oh, our Evelyn, she's still trying to find her way. She works with computers. That's the eulogy for my career they've written. It's a phrase they deliver with the same tone one might use for collects porcelain cats or builds ships in bottles. A quaint, harmless, and ultimately meaningless hobby. To them, my life is a question mark, a source of gentle, parental concern. I'm the child they worry about, the one they slip $100 bill to for groceries after a family dinner. And then there's my sister, Megan, soon to be Major Megan Reed of the United States Air Force. Megan is the framed picture on the mantelpiece, literally a professional 8x10 of her in her dress blues, smiling a brilliant, confident smile, sits right in the center of the living room shrine. My dad, a retired high school football coach, sees in Megan the ultimate team player, a champion. My mom, a real estate agent who thrives on curb appeal and good optics, sees in Megan a walking, talking billboard for success. She's tangible, she's understandable. Her promotions are real, her medals are shiny. Her life has a clear upward trajectory that they can track and brag about. She's not a bad person, my sister. Let me be clear about that. She's just a product of her environment. She's been bathed in the golden light of our parents' approval her entire life, and it's made her blind. She sees me through their lens, her older, smarter, but ultimately lost sister. The one who got the brains, but none of the common sense. She loves me in a pitying sort of way, the way you'd love a rescue dog that's afraid of loud noises. This dynamic isn't new. It's the foundation upon which my entire childhood was built. I was the quiet one with a book. She was the loud one on the soccer field. I was the one who won the state science fair, an achievement my parents acknowledged with a confused, "That's nice, dear," while she was the one who won homecoming queen. An event that prompted a week-long celebration and a front-page photo in the local paper. I remember the day we both announced our future plans. We were in the family living room, the summer after my high school graduation. Megan, 2 years younger than me, had just been accepted into the Air Force Academy. My father cried. He actually, literally cried with pride, clapping his daughter on the back so hard she stumbled. "An officer," he boomed, his voice thick with emotion. "My daughter is going to be an officer in the greatest Air Force in the world." My mother was already on the phone with her entire list of contacts, planning the celebratory barbecue. The air was thick with triumph. Then, all eyes turned to me. "Well, Evelyn," my mom said, momentarily pausing her party planning, "did you decide on a school yet?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, I've accepted my offer from MIT. I'm going for a double major in mathematics and computer science." Silence. It was a profound, echoing silence, filled only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. My father's proud smile faltered. My mother lowered the phone from her ear. MIT. My dad sounded the letters out, as if they were a foreign word he couldn't quite parse. "In Boston. What on earth are you going to do with a degree like that?" "Evie, it's one of the best programs in the world. Dad, I don't know, work for NASA, a tech company, the Department of Defense." But what kind of a job is that my mom cut in? Her brow furrowed in genuine confusion. Just sitting at a desk all day with numbers. Honey, are you sure you wouldn't be happier closer to home? Maybe a business degree from the state university. I tried to explain the potential, the excitement I felt, the infinite possibilities that were opening up in the digital world. But their eyes were glazed over. I wasn't describing a career. I was describing an alien landscape. They couldn't see it, couldn't touch it, so they couldn't value it. The conversation quickly, and with a sense of collective relief, turned back to Megan's future, to the honorable, understandable path she had chosen. I just sat there, a ghost at my own sister's celebration. My acceptance letter from one of the most prestigious universities on the planet, feeling like a worthless piece of paper in my pocket. That feeling became the wallpaper of my life. For the next decade, every family gathering was a variation on the same theme. Thanksgiving was the worst. Last year's was a particularly special vintage of humiliation. Megan, then a captain, had just returned from a 6-month deployment. She sat at the head of the table, not in uniform, but somehow still radiating authority. She told stories exciting, sanitized for civilian stories about flying missions over foreign deserts and managing a team of over 50 airmen. My entire family, including my aunts, uncles, and cousins, hung on her every word. They were captivated. And the responsibility, my gosh, my Aunt Carol gushed, to be in charge of so many people, so much important equipment, it's just incredible. Megan, you get used to it, Megan said with a humble shrug that wasn't humble at all. It's all about leadership and trusting your training. Later, during a lull in the conversation, my uncle turned to me. So, Evelyn, what's new with you still doing that computer thing? I pasted on a smile. Things are good. I'm leading a new project at work. It's pretty challenging. Oh, that's nice, dear, my father said, patting my hand with a dismissive finality. He then turned his entire body back to my sister. Now, Megan, tell us about that new fighter jet, the F-35. Is it really as impressive as they say? And just like that, I was invisible again. My project, a multi-agency task force I was commanding. A team of 150 of the brightest minds in the country working to counteract a hostile state-sponsored cyber attack, was reduced to that computer thing. A thing not even worthy of a follow-up question. I remember looking down at my hands, the same hands that had typed the code that located and neutralized a threat that could have crippled our nation's power grid. And I just felt small. Have you ever felt that so accomplished in one world and so utterly insignificant in another? And the worst part is, the world where you feel insignificant is the one that's supposed to be your home. The financial help was almost worse than the dismissal. It was a tangible manifestation of their belief in my failure. My mother was the primary culprit. She operated with the subtlety of a secret agent, slipping cash into my coat pocket or tucking a check into my birthday card with a whispered, "Just a little something to help out." Last Christmas, she'd outdone herself, while Megan received a beautiful, expensive designer watch. Because you always need to be on time, Captain, my gifts were a collection of pity, a gift certificate for a budget grocery store, a set of Tupperware containers so you can cook at home more. Sweetie, it's so much cheaper than eating out. And the grand finale, a book titled Dress for Success, a woman's guide to landing the job of her dreams. I held the book in my hands, its cheerful, condescending title burning into my retinas. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and announce that my annual salary could buy this entire house, that my bonus from the power grid project alone was more than my father's pension. I wanted to tell them that I didn't need to dress for success because I was a success, in a way they couldn't possibly comprehend. But I didn't, because what good would it do? It would be seen as bragging, as an outburst from their strange, unsuccessful daughter. It wouldn't change their minds. Their narrative about me was written in stone, so I just smiled, a tight, brittle smile, and said, "Thank you, Mom. This is very thoughtful." This history, this long and storied history of being the family ghost, was swirling in my head when the phone rang last Tuesday. I was in my home office, a space they'd call my computer room, looking over satellite data that was anything but quaint. The caller ID flashed Mom. I took a deep breath. shifting from a commander of national security to a daughter preparing for polite interrogation. Hi, Mom? Evelyn, hi, sweetie. How are you? Are you eating enough? She began. A classic opening. I'm fine, Mom, eating plenty. How are you? Oh, we're just wonderful. We have the most fantastic news, she chirped. And I knew instantly this call wasn't about me. It never was. Your sister is just a superstar. She's done it again. I braced myself. What's happened? She's been promoted to major. Can you believe it, Major Megan Reed? It just sounds so important. Wow, that's great news. Mom, tell her I said congratulations. I was genuinely happy for her. Megan was good at her job, and she deserved the recognition. My happiness for her and my frustration with my family were two separate, though often tangled, things. Oh, you'll tell her yourself, my mother said. The promotion ceremony is in 2 weeks, at the base in Nevada. We're all flying out. I've already booked our tickets. I'll send you the details. You can book your own flight. And Evelyn, her voice dropped into a more serious, concerned tone. Try to find something nice to wear, not just, jeans and one of your dark t-shirts. It's a formal occasion. The unspoken message was clear. Please, for one day, try not to embarrass us. A familiar wave of exhaustion washed over me. A cross-country flight to stand in a crowd, feeling like a ghost, while my family celebrated the one daughter they understood. It was the last thing I wanted to do. My work was at a critical juncture. I couldn't just leave. Mom, I don't know. I started. The excuse already forming on my lips. Work is really intense right now. Evelyn, her voice was sharp, laced with disappointment. This is for your sister. It's important. You need to be there to support her. Family shows up for each other. Surely you can get a few days off from whatever it is you do. And there it was. The guilt. The obligation. The unbreakable chain of family duty. If I didn't go, I would be the unsupportive, uncaring sister. I would prove their narrative right. I looked at the complex data streams on my multiple monitors, at the weight of my real world, and then I thought of the manufactured world of my family. For one more time, I knew I had to play the part. Okay, Mom, I sighed, the words tasting like defeat. Okay, send me the details. I'll be there. Oh, wonderful, she was instantly cheerful again. The crisis of my potential absence averted. We'll have such a lovely time, and we'll all be so proud of our major. I hung up the phone and stared into the reflection of my face on the dark monitor. I booked the flight. I was heading into the lion's den, the heart of my sister's world, a place where I was guaranteed to be invisible. Or so I thought. The 2 weeks between that phone call and my flight were a special kind of purgatory. On one hand, I had my real life, a world of consequence and urgency. We were tracking a newly emergent threat, a rogue AI that was learning to mimic encrypted military communication signatures with terrifying speed. It was a digital ghost, and my team and I were the Ghostbusters. The work was all-consuming, requiring a level of focus so intense that the outside world often melted away. But the outside world refused to melt. It kept intruding in the form of cheerful, condescending phone calls and text messages, each one a small puncture in the airtight focus my job demanded. Preparing for this family trip wasn't just about packing a bag. It was about preparing for psychological warfare. It was an exercise in strategic retreat, in choosing which pieces of myself to sacrifice in the name of keeping the peace. The first battle was with my closet. My mother's parting shot about my wardrobe echoed in my head. Try to find something nice to wear, not just, I knew. My daily uniform consists of dark, comfortable jeans, soft, high-quality t-shirts or sweaters, and practical shoes. It's a wardrobe built for function, for long hours spent staring at code, not for public display. Standing in my walk-in closet, I felt a wave of absurdity wash over me. I owned 3 impeccably tailored pantsuits that I wore for briefings at the Pentagon. Suits that cost more than my parents' monthly mortgage payment. But I couldn't wear those. That would be seen as trying too hard, a power move. It would be an aberration from their narrative of the quirky, underemployed daughter. So I pushed the power suits aside. I bypassed my comfortable work clothes. I landed on the perfect camouflage, a pair of beige trousers, a cream-colored silk blouse that was expensive but looked unassuming, and a pair of sensible, low-heeled loafers. I was assembling a costume. The character non-threatening, vaguely artistic daughter who is trying her best. It was bland. It was forgettable. It was perfect wallpaper. The next battle was delegating my work. This was where the chasm between my two worlds became a canyon. The day before I left, I held a briefing with my second-in-command, a brilliant 28-year-old from Caltech named David Chen. The Ghost AI has breached the third firewall on the test server, he reported, his eyes fixed on the data stream projected on the main screen of our command center. It's adapting faster than the models predicted. Ma'am, run diagnostics on its learning algorithm, I ordered, pointing to a specific block of code. I want to know how it's anticipating our countermeasures. It's not just reacting, it's extrapolating. David, while I'm out, you have command. No tactical engagement unless it makes a move on a live network. In which case, you follow Protocol Chimera 7 and you call me. I don't care what time it is or what I'm doing. Understood. Crystal clear. Dr. Reed, he said, his posture straightening ever so slightly. He saw me not as Evie, honey, but as his commander. In this room, my word was law. My intellect was a weapon. Here, I was not a disappointment. I was the last line of defense. The dissonance was jarring. I was about to leave a place where I held national security in my hands, to go to a place where I would be reminded to put a coaster under my glass. The phone calls, as expected, were relentless. My mother called 3 days before the trip, her voice a whirlwind of cheerful anxiety. Evelyn, just checking in. Sweetie, did you book your flight? Are you all packed? Hi, Mom. Yes, I'm all set. Oh, good. I was just telling your father. I hope Evelyn remembers how important this is. Megan has worked so hard. And the base? Well, it's not like one of your little coffee shops. It's very formal. People take things like patriotism and respect very seriously there. The implication hung heavy in the air that my world of academia and technology was somehow less patriotic. Less serious. That I, with my quiet life and my civilian clothes, didn't understand respect. I understand, Mom, and you'll be meeting her commanding officer, a Colonel Davies. He's a very important man. So please, Evelyn, just be nice. Don't talk about politics or anything controversial. I wasn't planning on it. Good. Just smile and say how proud you are of your sister. Everyone is so proud of her. My father's call was, in some ways, worse. He didn't do passive aggression. He did a sort of bumbling, heartfelt condescension that was impossible to fight. Evie girl, he started, the old nickname making me cringe. Your mother tells me you're all set for the big trip. Yep, flying out Friday morning. Dad? Good, you know, seeing your sister in her element. It might do you some good. See what a real career looks like. Structure, discipline, a purpose bigger than yourself. A purpose bigger than myself. I thought about the oath I'd taken when I accepted my position. An oath that was just as binding as any military one. I thought about the nights I'd spent sleeping on a cot in my office because a crisis was unfolding. I thought about the immense, crushing weight of my purpose, a purpose I could never, ever share with him. My work has purpose, Dad, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I know, he said quickly, already backtracking. That computer stuff is important. I'm sure. I just worry about you, kiddo. All alone in that big city? A nice girl like you should be settled down. You know, your sister. She's met a wonderful young man on the base, a pilot. Maybe you'll meet someone. 2. The conversation was so absurd it was almost comical. Here was my father, a man whose understanding of my life was based on sitcom tropes, advising me on my career and love life. It was like a toddler trying to explain astrophysics. The memories these calls dredged up were the worst part. They were the ghosts that haunted my preparation. As I folded my beige trousers into my suitcase, I wasn't just packing clothes. I was packing years of accumulated slights. I remembered my PhD graduation from MIT. It should have been one of the proudest days of my life. I was one of only 3 women in my doctoral program. My dissertation on quantum-resistant encryption was already being lauded as groundbreaking. My parents and Megan flew in for it. They sat in the vast auditorium, looking bored and bewildered. Megan, in her crisp Air Force uniform, looked like a visitor from another planet. After the ceremony, as my colleagues were celebrating with champagne and talking about their postdoc offers from Stanford and Cambridge. My father clapped me on the shoulder. "Well, that's a lot of schoolin'," he'd said, looking around at the joyful chaos. "Hope you can find a job now to pay for it all. Seems like a lot of fuss for a piece of paper." A piece of paper. He had reduced the culmination of 6 years of relentless, brain-breaking work to a piece of paper. Later that day, my mother had pulled me aside. "Honestly, Evelyn, it was a little dry, wasn't it, when Megan graduated from the academy? There was a parade, the Thunderbirds flew overhead. It was so inspiring. This was just a lot of talking. They had taken my moment, my pinnacle of academic achievement, and held it up against Megan's, finding it dull and wanting. It wasn't a celebration of my success. It was a confirmation of my strange, unrelatable choices. Then there was the memory of the blind date ambush of Christmas past. I was 29. I'd come home for the holidays, looking forward to a few days of quiet. The second night, my mother announced a surprise. "We're having dinner with the Hendersons, and they're bringing their son, Mark. He's just your age. And he's so successful. He just took over his father's hardware store." I was mortified. They had set me up. The implication was a roaring siren. "You are a failure at romance, and we are intervening for your own good." The dinner was excruciating. Mark the hardware king was perfectly nice, but we had absolutely nothing in common. My parents, sensing the lack of chemistry, went into overdrive, essentially trying to sell me like a used car. "Our Evelyn is just so smart," my mom would say, leaning in conspiratorially to Mark. "A little too smart for her own good sometimes. She gets lost in her books and her computer screens." When Mark politely asked me what I did, my father jumped in before I could answer. "Oh, it's some complicated IT thing. Don't get her started on it. Your eyes will glaze over," he'd said with a hearty laugh, as if my career was a charming but boring party trick. "She's much more fun when you get her talking about something normal, like dogs." I didn't talk much for the rest of the dinner. I just sat there, a potted plant with a PhD, while my parents painted a portrait of a girl I didn't even recognize. A girl who was smart, but not in a useful way. A girl who was single, not by choice, but by circumstance. A girl who needed a good, simple man to rescue her from her own strange, complicated brain. These were the ghosts I was packing in my suitcase. These were the voices that would be waiting for me in Nevada. The night before my flight, I sat in the dark of my living room, a glass of wine in my hand. The apartment was silent, my work was delegated, my bag was packed. There was nothing left to do but wait and wonder, why was I doing this? Why, after 32 years? Did I still walk into the fire, knowing I would get burned? If you've ever been in this position, you know the answer isn't simple. It's a toxic cocktail of guilt, duty, and the most stubborn, idiotic flicker of hope. The hope that, this time, they'll finally see you. This time, something will click. This time, you'll say the magic words that finally make them understand. It's a fool's hope, a lottery ticket you keep buying even though you know the odds are stacked against you. But you buy it anyway, because what's the alternative to cut them off, to admit that the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are incapable of seeing you fully? For me, that step had always felt too final, too devastating. So I was going to put on my beige costume, my polite smile, and my patient demeanor. I was going to applaud my sister's success and swallow my own. I was going to endure the condescending questions and the pitying glances. I set my alarm for 4:00 a.m. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I just ran drills, preparing my defenses, steeling my heart for the battlefield I called a family reunion. It was a battle I knew I couldn't win. I just had to survive it. The flight to Nevada was like a journey into another dimension. As the lush green of the East Coast gave way to the sprawling, sun-scorched expanse of the desert, I felt a part of myself closing down, battening down the hatches for the coming storm. The air that hit me when I stepped out of the Las Vegas airport wasn't just hot. It was aggressive. It was a dry, oppressive heat that felt like it was actively trying to bake the moisture out of you. A perfect metaphor for how my family made me feel. They were waiting for me at baggage claim, a little island of boisterous pride in the sea of weary travelers. My father spotted me first, and his face split into a wide grin. "There she is, our little computer whiz," he boomed, wrapping me in a bear hug that smelled of cheap rental car air freshener and Old Spice. My mother was next, her hug more of a clinical assessment. She held me at arm's length, her eyes scanning my face. "Evelyn, you look exhausted," she declared, as if my fatigue were a personal failing. "You're so pale, I keep telling you. You need to get out of that dark office of yours and get some sun." "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. It's good to see you too," I said, my voice already settling into the flat, neutral tone I reserve for these encounters. Megan wasn't with them. She was already on base preparing for the ceremony. The drive there was a masterclass in the family dynamic. My father navigated the highways with the aggressive confidence of a man who believed he was an honorary fighter pilot for the day, all while providing a running commentary on the real America we were driving through. The highlight came as we approached the base. My mother practically squealed, pointing to a large banner strung across a local diner. It featured a grainy photo of my sister in uniform. "Hometown proud congratulations, Captain Megan Reed." "Look, Evelyn, look, isn't that something?" my mother said, turning to me in the back seat, her eyes shining. "They put her picture up for everyone to see." "That's really nice, Mom," I said. Looking at the banner, it was something. It was another brick in the wall that separated my sister's life from mine. Entering the Air Force Base was like crossing a border into a sovereign nation. The guards at the gate were impossibly young and serious, their uniforms so crisp they looked like they could cut you. They saluted my father's veteran license plate, and he puffed out his chest, soaking in the borrowed respect. Everything was orderly, clean, and intimidating. The perfectly manicured lawns, the rows of identical beige buildings, the distant roar of a jet engine, it all hummed with a power and purpose that was utterly alien to me. This was Megan's turf. I was an intruder. We met her at the Officers' Club, a low-slung building with dark wood paneling and an air of quiet importance. The pre-ceremony reception was already underway. The room was a sea of blue dress uniforms everywhere, adorned with colorful ribbons and gleaming medals. The men all had sharp, military haircuts, and the women wore their hair in severe, perfect buns. And then there was me, in my beige trousers and cream blouse. I felt like a typo, a pale, civilian smudge in a world of sharp, primary colors. Megan detached herself from a group and strode toward us. In her uniform, she was transformed. She wasn't just my little sister anymore. She was an authority figure, confident and composed. She hugged our parents, then turned to me. "Evie, you made it," she said, her voice a little too loud, a little too bright. She squeezed me in a hug. "Wow, you look great." "So, normal." It was meant as a compliment, a backhanded, tone-deaf compliment that implied my usual state was something other than normal. "You too," I said. "Congratulations, soon to be major." "Thanks," she beamed. "Come on, I want you to meet some people." And so it began. The next hour was a slow, agonizing parade of me being introduced as a curiosity. We'd approach a group of her colleagues, and my parents would puff up with pride. "Colonel, I'd like you to meet my daughter, Major Select Megan Reed," my father would say, his voice full of reverence for the rank. The colonel, a stern-looking man with a chest full of ribbons, would shake Megan's hand warmly. "It's a pleasure, Reed. Your father here can't stop singing your praises." And my mother would chime in, gesturing vaguely in my direction. "This is our other daughter, Evelyn." The officer would give me a brief, polite nod, his eyes already flicking back to Megan, the person of consequence. The conversation would continue, flowing around me as if I were a piece of furniture. It happened over and over again. "This is Eve," my mom explained to the wife of another officer. "No, she's not in the service. She's our little artist, very creative." The way she said creative made it sound like a chronic, incurable illness. Megan, for her part, tried to include me in a way that only made it worse. She adopted the tone of a patient museum docent explaining a simple exhibit to a confused child. "So that's a flight suit," she whispered to me, pointing to a pilot walking by. "That's what they wear when they're actually flying the jets." "I know what a flight suit is, Megan," I said quietly. "Oh, right, sorry," she said, blushing slightly. "I just forget you don't see this stuff every day. It must be so overwhelming for you. Overwhelming wasn't the right word. Isolating, infuriating. Those were better. I felt like I was moving through a dream. Or rather, someone else's dream. I retreated into myself, adopting the detached observation mode that served me so well at work. I analyzed their social dynamics, the rigid hierarchy, the way they communicated in acronyms and jargon. I became an anthropologist studying a strange, unfamiliar tribe that I just happened to be related to by blood. It was the only way to survive. Finally, a soft bell chimed, and we were ushered into a small auditorium for the ceremony itself. I found myself seated in the front row, a place of honor, wedged between my ecstatic parents. My mother was already clutching a tissue. The ceremony was exactly what I expected: formal, precise, and steeped in tradition. A color guard marched in with flags. The national anthem was sung, and a chaplain gave a brief invocation. Then, a man with the eagle insignia of a colonel on his shoulders stepped up to the podium. Colonel Davies. He was tall and imposing, with a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite. He began to speak, his voice a commanding baritone that filled the room. He spoke about duty, honor, and leadership. Then he focused on Megan. He listed her accomplishments, her commendations, her leadership on her last deployment, her flawless record. Captain Reed represents the best of the United States Air Force, he said, his eyes scanning the crowd and landing on our row. She is a leader of integrity, intelligence, and unwavering dedication. It is my distinct honor to be her commanding officer, and an even greater honor to promote her to the rank of major. My father made a sound that was half sob, half cheer. My mother was openly weeping now, dabbing her eyes with her wadded-up tissue. I listened to the colonel's words, and a complicated mix of emotions churned inside me. I was proud. I truly was. My sister had worked hard for this. She was good at her job, but hearing her praised so publicly, so resoundingly, for a career that was so visible and celebrated, was like holding a mirror up to my own invisible world. The sting was sharp and profound. Megan walked onto the stage, her back ramrod straight. The colonel and my father ceremoniously removed her old rank insignia and pinned on the gold oak leaves of a major. The room erupted in applause. I clapped along, my hands feeling disconnected from my body, the sound hollow in my ears. I was playing my part. I was the supportive sister. After the ceremony, the crowd spilled back into the reception area for cake and coffee. The atmosphere was even more charged now. People crowded around my sister, the new major, offering congratulations. My parents were in heaven, shaking hands and accepting praise on Megan's behalf, as if they were the ones who had been promoted. This was, I think, my lowest point. A 4-star general, a man who looked like he radiated pure authority, stopped to shake Megan's hand. My parents were practically vibrating with excitement. They chatted with him for a full minute. I was standing less than 3 feet away, holding a small plate with a slice of dry cake on it, and they never once thought to introduce me. It wasn't malicious. It was worse. I was so irrelevant to the narrative of the day that I had simply ceased to exist. A few minutes later, Megan, flushed with triumph, made her way over to me. "See," she said, nudging my arm with her elbow. "It wasn't so bad. Was it you survived?" I just looked at her. Survived. Yes, that's what I had done. "Now you can get back to your quiet little life, and we can all go back to normal," she added with a smile, clearly thinking she was being kind, relieving me of the pressure of her world. It was the ultimate dismissal. My life, my intense, demanding. High-stakes life was quiet and little. Her normal was this world of pomp and public validation. My normal was a silent, secret battle to keep our country safe. The chasm between us had never felt wider. The crowd began to thin. My parents were collecting their coats, still buzzing. I was just about to suggest we leave when I saw Colonel Davies making a beeline for our little group. He was heading for Megan, a warm, congratulatory smile on his face. My parents lit up, ready for one more dose of praise. This was it, the grand finale. "Major," the colonel said, his voice booming. "Again, my sincerest congratulations. Your family must be incredibly proud." "We certainly are." Colonel Hub. My father beamed, shaking his hand vigorously. "This is my wife, Mary, and this is our other daughter, Evelyn." He gestured to me with a casual flick of his hand. The same way you'd point out a piece of interesting trivia, his tone was final, dismissive. "This is the other one, the unimportant one. Now let's get back to what matters." I braced myself for the familiar, polite nod, the quick, dismissive glance, the final humiliation in a day full of them. I was ready to just smile, say, "It's a pleasure to meet you," and then fade back into the wallpaper. But that's not what happened. Colonel Davies turned to me. His polite smile was still on his face, but as his eyes met mine, something shifted. He wasn't just looking at me, he was seeing me. His eyes, trained to recognize details, flickered over my face. A spark of confusion, then dawning recognition, then utter, profound shock washed over his features. His back, which had been relaxed, snapped ramrod straight. His friendly demeanor evaporated, replaced by an instantaneous, instinctual look of pure, unadulterated deference. The smile vanished. His jaw tightened. He looked from my face to my parents' proud, oblivious expressions, then back to me. The air crackled with a sudden, inexplicable tension. My family felt it, too. Their smiles faltered. They looked at the colonel, then at me, then back again. Their faces a mask of confusion. The colonel took a half step back. He cleared his throat, and when he spoke, his voice was 2 octaves lower, stripped of all its earlier warmth, and replaced with a tone of formal, almost fearful respect. "Ma'am," he said. His eyes locked on mine. "Dr. Evelyn Reed, forgive me. I didn't recognize you." He paused, swallowing hard as if the next words were difficult to get out. "Ma'am, you're the general." Time seemed to slow down, to stretch and warp like old film melting under a projector's bulb. The ambient chatter of the reception, the clinking of coffee cups, the polite laughter, it all faded into a dull, distant hum. The only thing that felt real was the space between the 4 of us and the ramrod-straight colonel. A space suddenly charged with a decade's worth of unspoken truths. My first thought was not one of triumph. It was a cold, sharp spike of professional annoyance, breach of protocol, unacceptable. My world, my real world, operated on the foundational principle of absolute discretion. The general was a ghost, a legend, a name on a kill chain authorization document that was never, ever supposed to be spoken aloud, let alone in a room full of military personnel and their families at a promotion ceremony. But my second thought, following swiftly on the heels of the first, was one of a dark, terrible, and deeply satisfying irony. Of course, this is how it would happen. Not in a dramatic reveal planned by me, but in a clumsy, accidental stumble into the truth by the very world they worshipped. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I held the colonel's terrified gaze, and with a slowness that felt deliberate, I gave a single, almost imperceptible shake of my head. It wasn't a denial. It was a command. Stand down. His training, his instinct, kicked in. He understood, but the damage was done, and the shockwave was already expanding, hitting my family with the force of a physical blow. My father's face was a masterpiece of bewildered collapse. The proud, booming patriarch who had been holding court all day seemed to shrink inside his suit. His mouth opened and closed silently, like a fish gasping for air. A small, nervous laugh escaped his lips, a pathetic puff of sound. "Heh, General," he muttered to himself, looking at me as if I'd just sprouted a second head. "What in the Sam Hill?" My mother's reaction was pure social terror. Her hostess smile was frozen on her face, a brittle, cracking facade, but her eyes were wide with a frantic, animal panic. This was a situation for which she had no script, no etiquette rulebook. Her world was built on predictable social structures, and I, her disappointing daughter, had just detonated a bomb in the middle of it. She looked at me, then at the colonel, her head swiveling back and forth, searching for a cue that would never come. But it was Megan's face that I would remember with the most clarity. All the triumphant joy from her promotion, the easy confidence, The casual pity she'd shown me all day had all vanished, replaced by a stark, raw, and utter incomprehension. Her eyes were locked on her commanding officer, a man she respected and revered, a man who was now standing at rigid attention, not for her, the new major, but for her quiet, beige, older sister. Then her gaze shifted to me, and for the first time, I think she truly saw me. Not as her sister, but as a complete and utter stranger. The foundation of her world, the one where she was the sun and I was a distant, fading moon, was crumbling to dust at her feet. It was my father who finally broke the spell, clinging to the only reality he understood. Ha, he barked. A desperate attempt at a joke. Colonel, you must have our Evie mixed up with someone else. This one's biggest battle is with her Wi-Fi router on a Sunday morning. He looked around, expecting laughter, expecting the world to snap back into its proper alignment. But no one laughed. I turned my head slightly, my gaze leaving the now sweating colonel and landing on my father. I gave him a small, placid smile that didn't reach my eyes. It's been a long day, I said, my voice calm and even. It was a voice they had never heard before. It was not the voice of their daughter. It was the voice I used in command briefings. Quiet, controlled, final. I think we were just about to leave. We wouldn't want to keep the colonel from his duties. I had just given him an exit, a lifeline. He seized it with the desperation of a drowning man. Yes, of course, ma'am, he stammered. The ma'am slipping out again, a reflex he couldn't control. He cleared his throat. Dr. Reed, it was an honor to meet you and your family. Major, he added, giving a stiff, formal nod to Megan before practically fleeing the scene. He didn't walk away. He retreated. We were left alone, the four of us, in a sudden, deafening bubble of silence. The remaining guests in the room seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere. Conversations faltered. People were starting to look at us, at the Reed family, whose golden child's triumphant day had just taken a spectacularly weird turn. I'm going to get some air, I said into the silence, and without waiting for a reply, I turned and walked toward the glass doors that led out onto a small patio. The desert air, which had felt oppressive earlier, was now a welcome shock to my system. I leaned against the railing, breathing in the scent of dry dust and creosote, and stared out at the distant, hazy mountains. I was giving them a moment to process, but I was also giving myself a moment to absorb the tectonic shift that had just occurred. The secret I had carried for so long, a weight that had often felt like a shroud, had just become a shield. No, not a shield. A weapon. The glass door slid open behind me. It was Megan. She walked over and stood beside me, not speaking for a long time. She was no longer the confident major. She was just a confused woman, her hands shoved into the pockets of her immaculate dress uniform. Evie, she began, her voice small, uncertain. What was that? You have to tell me what that was. It was a misunderstanding, I said, reciting the line I had prepared years ago for a scenario just like this. No, she shot back, a flicker of her old fire returning. No, it wasn't. I know Colonel Davies. He's not a man who makes mistakes like that. The way he looked at you, it was like he'd seen a ghost. What did he mean? The general. It's a work nickname. Megan, an inside joke. It's nothing. An inside joke, she asked, her voice rising with incredulity. Commanding officers don't stand at attention for an inside joke. They don't call my civilian sister ma'am with more respect than they show the actual generals who visit this base. My parents had emerged onto the patio now, drawn by the sound of her raised voice. Evelyn, for heaven's sake, what is going on? My mother demanded, her voice shrill with panic. Who is that man? What have you gotten yourself involved in? The question was so typical, so perfectly them. Their immediate assumption was that I had done something wrong, that I was involved in some kind of trouble. The possibility that I might be involved in something important, something powerful, was simply not in their vocabulary. I'm not involved in anything, Mom, I said, turning to face them. I looked at the three of them. Their faces a mixture of confusion, fear, and anger. The old dynamic was trying to reassert itself. They were the concerned parents, the superior sister, and I was the difficult, secretive child who owed them an explanation. But the script was different now. The stage had changed. It's my job, I said simply. Colonel Davies likely recognized my name from a cross-agency memo. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. My father's voice was a low rumble. He finally seemed to have found his footing, and his footing was anger. That man looked at you like you could have him fired with a snap of your fingers. What kind of IT job gives you that kind of pull? What exactly do you do, Evelyn? Here it was, the question they had never bothered to ask with any real curiosity for over a decade. And my answer now was the same as it had always been. But this time, it landed differently. I've told you, I work with computers. I'm a project lead. What project? What's it called? Megan pressed, stepping forward. I'm not at liberty to discuss it. Why not? It's classified. The word hung in the air, just as General had. But this one was mine. It was a door I was shutting in their faces. A door that had always been there, but that they had never bothered to knock on. Now they were rattling the handle, and it wouldn't budge. Classified. My father scoffed. But the word had no heat behind it. It was a deflated, impotent sound. What are you, some kind of spy? I just looked at him and didn't answer. I let the silence do the work. I let their imaginations, which had for so long painted me as a failure, run wild in the other direction. Let them wonder. They had never granted me the grace of their belief. I would not grant them the comfort of an explanation. We drove back to their hotel in a silence that was heavier than any argument. My father gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. My mother stared out the window, twisting a tissue in her hands. Megan sat in the back with me, occasionally glancing at my profile, her brow furrowed in thought. The power in the car had shifted so completely, it was almost a physical presence. They were no longer in charge. Their questions, their demands, their concerns. They all bounced off the new, invisible wall that had risen around me. A wall built not of secrets, but of their own willful ignorance, now made manifest. When we pulled up to the hotel entrance, I spoke for the first time since the patio. My flight is at 6 a.m. tomorrow. I've already called for a car to take me to the airport. You're not staying for brunch, my mother asked, her voice small. It was a pathetic attempt to grasp at the old, normal routine. No, I said, I have to get back to my project. I got out of the car. I didn't wait for hugs or goodbyes. I just closed the door and looked at them through the window. 3 faces, utterly bewildered. For my entire life, I had craved their understanding, their approval. I had contorted myself into smaller shapes to be more palatable to them. And now, in a single, accidental moment, I had something far more powerful. I had their complete and utter confusion. For the first time in my life, they had no idea what to say to me, and it was the most powerful sound I had ever heard. The silence in the rental car after I closed the door was, I imagine, absolute. I didn't stay to watch them drive away. I simply turned and walked into the generic, brightly lit lobby of my hotel, a different one from theirs, a small act of boundary setting I had insisted on when I booked my ticket. The polite bellhop asked if I needed any bags, and I just shook my head. My voice not quite working yet. I felt like a deep sea diver ascending too quickly. My body still trying to adjust to the sudden, drastic change in pressure. My room was on the 12th floor, a sterile box of beige and brown with a sprawling view of the city lights shimmering in the desert darkness. I dropped my keys on the dresser, kicked off my sensible loafers, and walked over to the window, down below. The world was alive with frantic energy cars streaming, neon signs flashing, a city that never slept. Up here, there was only silence. My first emotion wasn't triumph. It wasn't the cathartic, movie moment release you might expect. It was a profound, bone-deep weariness, the kind that comes after a battle, even one you've unexpectedly won. The armor I had worn all day, the bland clothes, the placid smile, the patient silence had been heavier than I realized. I peeled off the cream silk blouse, the beige trousers, my own personal uniform of invisibility, and let them fall to the floor. I pulled on a soft, worn t-shirt from my bag, one of my usual dark gray ones, and a pair of yoga pants. It felt like reclaiming my own skin. Then, the professional in me took over. The annoyance I'd felt at the colonel's slip-up solidified into a necessary action item. I picked up my phone, but I didn't look at the inevitable flood of family messages yet. I went to my secure messaging app and typed a short, encrypted note to David Chen, my second in command. Potential protocol breach, name only, unavoidable civilian context. Assess any chatter. I'll handle the fallout on my end. His reply came back in less than a minute. Understood, ma'am. We'll monitor it. Glad you're okay. Glad you're okay, in his world. That meant glad you weren't compromised. In my family's world, it meant, are you eating enough? The gap between those two realities had never been wider. With my professional duty handled, I finally allowed myself to look at the family group chat. It was a mess of frantic, confused texts sent during their silent, agonizing drive back to their hotel. Mom, Evelyn, you need to call us immediately. Mom, what is going on? We are worried sick. Dad, answer your phone. Megan, Evie, we need to talk, now. I looked at the messages, a string of demands born from panic. There was no apology for the years of dismissal, no dawning self-awareness, just a frantic need to understand the new power dynamic so they could figure out how to navigate it. I set the phone face down on the nightstand. For years, a text like that would have sent a jolt of anxiety through me, a compulsion to reply, to smooth things over, to manage their feelings. Now, I felt nothing but a quiet, calm resolve. Let them wait. I had been waiting my whole life for them to see me. They could wait a few hours for me to decide if I still wanted to be seen. I showered, letting the hot water wash away the sterile feel of the base, the cloying scent of my mother's perfume, the weight of their pity as I stood there, wrapped in a towel. The knock came at the door. It wasn't loud or demanding, just a soft, hesitant rap, rap, rap. I knew who it was. My parents would have called up from the front desk. Megan, using the skills she learned in the military, would have found a way to bypass the front desk and come straight to the source. I pulled on the hotel robe, cinched it tight, and opened the door. She stood there in the hallway, looking smaller and younger than she had all day. She had taken off her uniform jacket, and in just her blue service shirt and slacks. She looked less like a major and more like my little sister again. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. The unwavering confidence was gone, replaced by a raw, desperate vulnerability. How did you find my room? I asked, my voice flat. I'm good at finding people who don't want to be found, she said. A weak attempt at a joke. Can I come in? I hesitated, then stepped back, holding the door open. She walked past me into the room and stood awkwardly in the middle of the floor, looking around at the impersonal space. They're freaking out, she said without turning around. Mom is convinced you're in the mafia. Dad thinks you're a spy for a foreign government. They're spinning out. And what do you think? I asked, closing the door and leaning against it. She finally turned to face me, and her expression was one of complete, agonizing confusion. I don't know what to think. Evie, that's the problem. I thought I knew you. I thought I knew your life. This whole time, I've been pitying you. She said the word like it was a shard of glass in her mouth. I felt sorry for you, for your little job and your quiet life. I thought you were this fragile, brilliant thing that just couldn't handle the real world. And today, my CO, a man I respect more than almost anyone, looked at you like you were the real world, and we were all just living in it. Her voice cracked. Who are you? She whispered. Please, just tell me. Here it was. The moment for the big speech. The I told you so. The angry, cathartic monologue where I laid out every slight, every humiliation, every single time they had made me feel small. I had rehearsed versions of this speech in my head for years, but looking at her now, at the genuine wreckage of her certainty, the anger felt unnecessary. Gloating felt cheap. I'm the same person I've always been. Megan, I said, my voice softer now. I'm the girl who loved her computer more than she loved cheerleading practice. I'm the woman who went to MIT and got 2 doctorates because I find joy in solving impossible problems. I'm the sister you never bothered to ask about her work. Not really. The truth in that last sentence landed with the force of a slap. She flinched. That's not fair, she said weakly. We asked. No, you didn't, I countered, pushing off the door and taking a step closer. You asked, how's the computer thing? You never asked. What problems are you solving, Evelyn? What is the name of your dissertation, and why were you passionate enough to spend 6 years writing it? What does it feel like to lead a team of people who are counting on you to make the right call? You didn't want to know about my world? You just wanted it to fit into a neat little box labeled Evie's hobby, so you could continue to feel superior about yours. I was never trying to feel superior. Weren't you? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Wasn't it easier for you, for all of you, to be the celebrated one, the successful one? If I was the floundering one, it made the family story so much simpler. Didn't it? The brave soldier and her quirky, struggling sister. Tears were streaming down her face now. We were just worried about you. You weren't worried, I said, and the final, hard truth settled between us. You were comfortable. My perceived failure was a comfortable, familiar piece of furniture in the family living room. And today, the furniture got up and walked out of the house, and you don't know how to rearrange the room. She sank onto the edge of the bed, covering her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook with quiet sobs. I watched her, feeling a strange and painful distance. This was my sister, and I loved her. But the person she had been to me for the last decade was a stranger I didn't know if I could ever let back in. The damage was too deep. What is the general? She asked through her hands. It's a name, I said, offering a small, incomplete piece of the truth. It's a title for a position. It's not important. It seemed pretty important to Colonel Davies. Colonel Davies understands a world of rank and authority. I said, that's all he saw. He saw a rank higher than his, and he reacted accordingly. It doesn't change anything. It changes everything, she cried, looking up at me, her face blotchy and desperate. It changes everything about how I see you, how I see Mom and Dad, how I see myself all those times we gave you advice or slipped you money. My God, Evie, you must have thought we were the biggest fools on the planet. Fools. No, that wasn't the word. The word was sad. It was just all so incredibly sad. I just thought you could have tried harder to know me, I said. That's all. She had no answer for that. She sat there for a long time before finally standing up, wiping her eyes on the sleeve of her shirt. I have to go, she mumbled. They'll be wondering where I am. She walked to the door and paused with her hand on the knob. For what it's worth, she said, not looking at me. I'm sorry. And then she was gone. I stood in the silent room, the echo of her apology hanging in the air. It was the first apology I'd received in 32 years, and I felt nothing. It was too little, too late. A single drop of rain on a decade-long drought. My phone rang. It was my father. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered, putting it on speaker. Evelyn, his voice was strained, awkward. Your sister just got back. She's very upset. I'm sure she is. Listen, he started. And I could hear my mother whispering in the background. We don't understand what happened today. You need to tell us what's going on. No, I said. The words simple and clean. I don't. You listen here, young lady, he blustered. The old patriarchal authority trying to kick in. I am still your father. And I am a 32-year-old woman. I cut him off, my voice cold and clear. I have been living my life successfully, on my own terms, for a very long time. You just chose not to see it. We can talk again when you're ready to speak to me as an equal, not as a child who needs to be interrogated. I have to go now. And for the first time in my life, I hung up on him. I went to the window and looked out at the lights again. The shockwave had hit. The old structures were broken. What would grow in their place, I had no idea. But for the first time, I felt like I was the one holding the blueprints. The future was a blank, terrifying, and wonderfully open page. The flight back to the East Coast felt like traveling forward in time. With every mile that separated me from the Nevada desert, I felt the heavy cloak of my family's expectations peeling away. Layer by layer, I was flying away from the ghost I had been and back toward the woman I actually was. It was a feeling not of giddy happiness, but of a quiet, clean, and profound sense of relief. The kind of relief that comes from finally putting down a weight you didn't realize you'd been carrying for your entire life. I didn't look at my phone. The barrage of texts I knew would be there could wait for the first time. Their panic was not my problem to solve. Their confusion was not my responsibility to soothe. Instead, I pulled out my encrypted work laptop, a sleek, matte black device that held more secrets than most people could imagine, and got to work. The data from the Ghost AI project was waiting for me. As the plane soared at 30,000 feet, I was once again immersed in my real world. A world of elegant code, complex algorithms, and existential threats. And I felt, for the first time in a long time, completely and utterly at peace. I was home, back at the command center the next day. The contrast was almost comical. The air here was always cool, the light always low. The only sound the soft hum of servers and the quiet, focused tapping of keyboards. This was my sanctuary. This was my real officers' club. The Ghost has been probing the Department of Energy's servers, David reported, pointing to a cascading waterfall of code on the main screen. It's using the protocols we predicted, but the infiltration speed is 15% faster. It's learning. It's not just learning, it's improvising, I said, my eyes scanning the data. It's creating hybrid infiltration methods we haven't seen before. It's creative. I looked around at my team, a collection of brilliant, dedicated misfits, much like myself. Okay, people, I said, my voice resonating with a calm authority that felt as natural as breathing. Let's get creative. 2. I want a new countermeasure protocol, not a wall, but a maze, a labyrinth of false data so tempting it can't resist. I want it to get so lost chasing its own tail that we can corner it and dissect it piece by piece. My team got to work, a symphony of focused, intellectual energy. David lingered for a moment. Glad to have you back, ma'am, he said, his expression carefully neutral. Hope the family trip went okay. I allowed myself a small, knowing smile. It was illuminating. David. Very illuminating. He nodded, understanding that was all the explanation he was going to get, and turned back to his station. The awkward overtures from my family began that evening. They had clearly regrouped, strategized, and decided on a new approach. The first call was from Megan. Her voice on the phone was hesitant, stripped of all its former breezy confidence. Hey, Evie. Hey, Megan. Listen, I was reading an article today about quantum computing, she stammered, the words sounding foreign and clumsy in her mouth. And it made me think of you. I didn't understand most of it, but it seemed important. I was silent for a beat, absorbing this. It was clumsy. It was awkward. But it was also the first time in our adult lives she had ever made an effort to connect with my world. It was an olive branch, a very small, very tentative olive branch. It is important, I said, deciding to meet her halfway. What did the article say? Something about breaking encryption. That's part of it, I said. Think of it this way. Most of the world's secrets are locked in digital safes. For decades, we've all been using the same kinds of keys. Quantum computing is like someone inventing a key that can open all of those safes, all at once. Wow, she said, a note of genuine awe in her voice. So, your job is to build new kinds of safes. Something like that. I said, I build safes, and I hunt the people who are trying to build the new keys. It was a gross oversimplification, a cartoon version of my reality. But it was a bridge. It was a start. We talked for a few more minutes. The conversation stilted and strange. Before hanging up, it wasn't a warm conversation, but it was the most honest one we'd had in years. The call from my parents came 2 days later. It was even more awkward. My father, a man who commanded a room with his voice, sounded like a nervous teenager asking for a date. Evelyn, it's Dad. Hi, Dad. Your mother and I. We wanted to say that we're sorry, he grumbled. The apology clearly costing him a great deal of pride. For the other day, we were out of line. We just don't understand, sweetie, my mother's voice cut in, laced with a familiar note of helplessness. All these years, we had no idea. We thought you were struggling. I know what you thought, I said, my voice gentle but firm. That's the problem, you thought. But you never asked. You never listened. We want to listen now, she said quickly. We want to understand. And here it was, my chance, not for revenge, not for an I told you so, but for something far more important, a renegotiation of terms, the drawing of new battle lines. Okay, I said, taking a deep breath. I would like that. But if we're going to have a real relationship, there have to be new rules. Rule number 1. My work is my own. You don't need to understand it. You just need to respect that it's important to me and that I am very, very good at it. Rule number 2. You will no longer offer me money or financial advice. My finances are my own, and they are fine. Rule number 3. You don't get to comment on my personal life, my clothes, or my choices unless I specifically ask for your opinion. You just have to trust that I'm a capable adult who knows how to run her own life. I paused, letting the rules sink in. We can talk about books or movies or what you had for dinner. You can tell me about your garden. And I can tell you about a funny thing my cat did. We can be a family, but it has to be a family of equals. Can you agree to that? The silence on the other end of the line was long and heavy. I could hear their entire worldview, their entire mode of parenting, being dismantled. Yes, Evelyn, my mother said finally, her voice small and subdued. We can agree to that. Months have passed since that day. The change wasn't instantaneous. It's a slow, awkward, and ongoing process. There are still moments of friction, moments where they slip back into old habits. But now, I have the tools to handle it. I don't get angry. I just enforce the boundary. Mom, we agreed you wouldn't comment on that, I'll say, and the conversation will shift. Our phone calls are different, shorter sometimes, but more real. They ask me about the book I'm reading. I ask them about my dad's golf game. Megan sent me a link to a documentary about Alan Turing with a simple text. Thought you'd find this cool. I sent her back. I did. It's a new language we're learning. One built on the shaky ground of mutual respect instead of the crumbling foundation of their assumptions. It's not perfect, but it's real. The most profound change, however, wasn't in them. It was in me. I realized the title, the general, was never the point. It was just a catalyst, a clumsy, accidental reveal that forced a confrontation I should have initiated years ago. The real power didn't come from Colonel Davies's deference. It came from the moment I decided to hang up the phone on my father. It came from the moment I looked my sister in the eye and told her she didn't know me. It came from my realization that I had spent years craving the approval of people who were determined not to give it, when the only approval I ever really needed was my own. Last night, we had a breakthrough on the Ghost AI project, a real one, at 2 a.m., standing in the cold, quiet hum of the command center. I watched as my team's labyrinth protocol trapped the rogue AI in a feedback loop. We had it. Isolate it, I ordered, my voice calm in the tense room. Full diagnostic. I want to know where it was born, who wrote it, and what its ultimate objective was. Let's get to work. As my team moved with quiet, focused efficiency, I stood back and just watched them. This was my uniform. This room was my battlefield. This was my rank. It wasn't given to me by a government or a military branch. It was a title I had earned in silence, in darkness, through years of relentless work and dedication to a purpose bigger than myself, a purpose they would never understand. And that was okay. So, if you're out there, and you feel like the ghost at your own family's table, if your successes are invisible and your passions are misunderstood, please remember this. You do not need them to give you a title. You do not need their applause to validate your work. Your success is not measured by their comprehension of it. Your job is to build your world, to command your own army, to become the general of your own life. And when you've done that, you'll be the one who decides who gets a security clearance. You'll be the one holding the key. And trust me, that's a power no rank can give you.